Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 959, and today's date is May 1st, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. On Saturday, I uploaded an interview with Michael Pinto on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So you can go right over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It'll bring you right to the channel. You can view the video there. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the video there. Or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing. Scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side. You'll see the video there. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, at this point, I see very interesting things happening, and we should all be looking at these indicators and what the government, what the central banks, what the banks are saying at this point. Because when we start to look around and we hear what they're saying, we see the opposite occurring. Now, they're trying to convince us that the economy is doing better. Europe has recovered. They continually push the idea that everything is fine in Europe. We see here in the United States, Obama is out there trying to defend why the economy is falling apart. Actually, he's saying it's not falling apart. It was the problem of everyone else except for him. The central bank, they've had their Fed meeting, and they reported that everything is fine in the economy. And we know they're continually creating currency through QE. We understand there's negative interest rates. We understand eventually, as the debt has grown, they will have to implement some type of wealth tax, carbon tax, or do bail-ins, or all the above. Because what we're seeing right now is a deterioration of the entire economic system. And right now we see Deutsche Bank, they are in trouble. And according to Deutsche Bank's Dominic Konstam, he's saying that now, since the benefits of QE have run their course, it is time for the next phase. And what is the next phase? Well, it looks like it could be a wealth tax. Now, if they impose a wealth tax, who's going to be affected? Well, it's going to be all the people around the world. And what that means is they want taxes and revenue coming in to bring down the debt. They don't want to pay the debt off. That's not how their system works. They just want to bring it down a little bit so they can sustain it. Now, the people are going to lose more and more of their wealth. And what that means is it's going to make it harder and harder for them. So we can see where we're going at this point. Now, out in Italy, we know their banks are in a huge amount of trouble. Now, the Italian banks, they're saddled with about 360 billion euros of non-performing loans. And the problem is they do not have enough funds to rescue these banks. They only managed to raise about 4.25 billion euros from 67 Italian and international institutions. And this is a tiny fraction of what they need. And this is going to be a huge problem going forward, because we see already Austria, Italy, they're all having bail-ins at this time. And we see right now that Deutsche Bank, the Italian banks, Austrian banks, they're all in trouble. And if we look at the United States, those banks are in trouble. And we see, to impose the wealth tax, basically what they're going to do is they're going to tax the people in their savings accounts. This is what they're planning at this point in time. Why? Because the economy is breaking down. Now, the U.S. Treasury, they are warning China, Germany, Japan not to devalue their currencies. And we see right now that as they continually devalue their currencies, the value of the dollar continually goes up, and it makes it very hard for the United States to operate. And we're starting to see that, and it's reflecting on the economy. And this is what happens during currency wars. In other words, the next country that dares to engage in wholesale currency devaluation with the U.S. without its permission, they're going to get it. What that it is, we don't know. But they're making a threat to all these countries. Don't do this anymore because the entire system is crumbling and falling apart. Now, on Tuesday, the Senate blocked a vote, Senator Rand Paul's bill on auditing the Fed. Now, you would think the U.S. government would want to audit the Fed to make sure everything's on the up and up, just like you wanted to audit any corporation that's in business. And of course, those corporations that say, no, we don't want an audit, you know they're doing something wrong. Now, of course, what we're seeing right now is the bill would have authorized the General Accounting Office to have access to more information of the Federal Reserve, and they would have delved into things that the Federal Reserve didn't want the U.S. government looking at. And remember, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. They're not part of the government whatsoever. And of course, they're using the excuse of the reason why we don't want you to audit the Fed is because it's going to hurt small businesses. It's going to hurt the economy. Really, I think this is what Enron said when they were going to be audited, that it would hurt the communities, it would hurt the businesses across the country, and it wouldn't be a really good idea to start auditing us. Well, we found out that, guess what? They were scam artists. They were ripping off everybody, and the whole thing was a sham. Well, if they audit the Fed, guess what we're going to see? We're going to see the exact same thing. Now, very interestingly, I have a list here on the X22Report.com site which shows which senators voted yes for the audit and which senators said no to the audit. Now, the question is, those no senators, are they on the payroll of the Fed to do their bidding? Of course they are. What other incentive would it be for them to vote no of a system that's supposed to be handling the finances of the entire country by creating money out of thin air? So we can see at this point that the only reason the Fed is operational is because they pay off certain government employees and keep them in line. And that's it. Now, as this economy continually deteriorates, we see the government right now is looking to spy on more and more people. It's looking for wealth tax. It's looking to bring in more revenue. It's looking to take away the rights of the people. And right now, the Supreme Court approved new rules on Thursday that would give the FBI the authority to hack any computer in the United States and maybe some computers overseas. Now, a magistrate judge with authority in any district where activities related to crime, guess what? They have the authority to issue a warrant to use remote access to search electronic storage. They can seize or copy the information. They have full access. And this legislation also says that if the media or information is located, has been concealed through technological means, the question is, what does concealed through technological means mean? Well, the court is referring to computers whose location is hidden via the use of anonymity software, such as the Tor web browser. Currently, the magistrate judges cannot issue warrants for remote searches. So the FBI, under legal terms, cannot go ahead and search computers. But we know they're not really using the legal way of doing it. We know the FBI, CIA, NSA have been spying on everyone through different channels. But this is making it legal for them to get a warrant and search computers. And Senator Ron Wyden is out there, and he's questioning this and saying that these amendments will have significant consequences for Americans' privacy and the scope of the government's power to conduct remote surveillances and searches of electronic devices. He said, under the proposed rules, the government would be able to obtain a single warrant to access and search thousands or millions of computers at once. And the vast majority of those computers that are going to be searched would belong to the victims, not the perpetrators of the cybercrime. But this is exactly what they want. They want the ability to say, see, it's legal. We have the right to search everyone's computer in America. Now, can they do that? Well, that'd be very time consuming. But they can pinpoint certain groups, certain individuals, because those people that are a threat to the authority of the government, those are the people that they're searching. Those are the people that they want to find out something about. And we can see where we are headed at this point. Now, out in North Korea, we understand the U.S. has been trying to provoke North Korea. They're also trying to provoke Russia, China, Iran, Syria into war. Now, on the demilitarized zone in South Korea, North Korea, they have reported that some of the South Korean soldiers, they were aiming their guns at the north. And they're saying that U.S. soldiers that were stationed there encouraged the South Korean soldiers to do this. Now, the question is, why would they want to go ahead and do this? Well, they're trying to provoke, because if they all raised their weapons, they were hoping that North Korea would raise their weapons and maybe someone would make an accident and actually fire. Well, guess what? That would start a war. And you can see all these little incidences and everything that's happening right now, it's all about provoking. Now, out in Ukraine, it looks like the U.S. is taking it to the next level here. U.S. Congress, they're going to introduce a bill to contain, reverse, and deter Russian aggression. And what is this bill? Well, they're proposing sanctions against Russia be lifted if and when Crimea is returned to Ukraine. So the lawmakers also propose that any form of recognition of Crimea, and that's the airspace above or the waters around, as part of Russia be rejected right now. Now, the French are taking an opposite stance. They're saying these sanctions aren't working. Our people, our agriculture, it is hurting. Our economy is hurting because of this. And we want to remove the sanctions. But we understand why the U.S. is placing sanctions or wants to place sanctions, because they didn't get Ukraine. They want Crimea. They want the southeastern section. They want the oil deposits. They want the coal. They want the port in the Black Sea of Crimea. And right now, they didn't get what they paid for. The central bankers want the entire country of Ukraine. And we see right now, things are heating up there. We know that the southeastern people went to Kiev and said, listen, let's have a ceasefire during this Easter break. Kiev agreed for the ceasefire. And then Kiev came out and said, okay, the southeastern people are breaking the ceasefire deal. Now, this is kind of ridiculous because they're the ones who proposed it. They're the ones who said, let's do this. And we can see right now they're continually provoking. Now, NATO, they're going to be deploying additional 4 battalions of 4,000 troops in Poland and 3 Baltic states. Now, this is coming from the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense, Robert Work. And the reason why they're doing this, of course, it's Russian aggression. But they're saying that Russia is continually moving closer and closer to their borders in their own country and having military drills. That's kind of weird. It is their own country. They're inside of their country and they can go right up to the border. Can you imagine in the United States, if the United States Armed Forces were inching closer to the border of Mexico or Canada, and Mexico or Canada said, okay, now we need to get troops here because United States, they have troops, the National Guard, inside the country, very close to their borders. Well, that would make no sense whatsoever. And people would look at that and scratch their head and say, what? We're in our country. We can have troops there. We can have a base right at the border. But they're doing this for one reason and one reason only, and that is to bring more military assets and more troops to this area. Now, out in Egypt, the U.S. withdrew its security forces from the Sinai Peninsula in response to Egypt's transfer of sovereignty of the Tiran and Sanafir Islands to Saudi Arabia. And they said they withdrew their 100 troops from the multinational peacekeeping force in northern part of the Sinai because Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt struck a deal without the United States. Now, it looks like that there could be some type of coup happening there. It looks like they might be getting ready to unleash something on Iran. This is a scenario that we're going to have to watch very, very closely. Now, a couple reports ago, we talked about how the U.S. was changing how they calculated how many civilians have died in bombings. And we're seeing that the U.S. is picking up the bombing runs in Iraq and in Syria. And the U.S., they claim that they've only killed about 26 civilians in Iraq and Syria. And a senior Pentagon official said this is completely unrealistic. He goes, let's just think about this for a second. We've destroyed 6,000 buildings with over 40,000 bombs and missiles. And we've killed 26 civilians? Completely impossible. So the U.S. has escalated its airstrikes on Mosul, and 2 large dairy farms were bombed, killing about 100 civilians and wounding about 200 more. Multiple daytime airstrikes on Mosul University on March 19th and the 20th killed about 92 civilians and wounded about 135. 50 civilians were killed and 100 wounded by airstrikes on 2 apartment buildings. A mother and 4 children were killed in airstrikes on a house of the Hay al-Dubat district of East Mosul on April 20th. 22 civilians were killed in airstrikes on houses in front of Mosul Medical College. 20 civilians were killed and 70 wounded by airstrikes on the Sunni Waqif building and nearby houses and shops. So we can see at this point that I know the U.S. is out there blaming everything on Assad, but when we look at the U.S.'s record of killing civilians, which there are a lot, and probably a lot more that aren't even reported, we see why they're changing the scale of how they calculate civilian casualties. Because right now, what we're seeing is they're increasing the bombing runs. They're losing control in Iraq. They're losing control in Lebanon. They're losing control in Libya. They're losing control in Yemen. And they're going to increase the battle in Syria, and a lot more civilians are going to die. We are headed into major war. Now, we understand now why Obama wanted to have more and more troops in Iraq. They're losing control of Iraq. They're losing control because the people there are very angry and pissed off, and hundreds of demonstrators occupy the country's parliament from inside the building, and they're waving Iraqi flags and shouting, peaceful, peaceful. They do not want the present government at this point. Now, the Iraq security authorities, they have declared a state of emergency in Baghdad. All gates leading to Baghdad are closed. No one is allowed to enter into Baghdad, but they can leave. And right now the U.S. is not evacuating everyone because they're going to try to maintain control in Iraq. And we see at this point they are losing control all throughout the Middle East. And as this continues, their only alternative is going to start war, because once they lose control and all these countries come off the petrodollar, it's game over. And they realize this. Now, we see the ceasefire in Damascus. It was extended for 1 more day, and the Free Syrian Army is rejecting idea of a truce in specific areas of Syria, because what they're saying is there should be a truce everywhere, even covering the Islamic State. Well, we know the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government and the central bankers, the coalition forces. And we realize Russia is continually bombing these areas where the Islamic State is, or any terrorist organization. The Free Syrian Army, the United States government, central bankers do not like this. They want the entire area, but we know this is not going to happen because Russia realizes what the U.S. is planning. They realize what is going on there. This is why they're stepping up their bombing runs in this area, and they're trying to push all the terrorists out of the country. They're liberating more towns and cities and villages, and the U.S. is bringing in more forces, building 2 bases, runways, bringing in fighters. Germany is upgrading the base in Incirlik to bring in their Tornado fighters, more military. Saudi Arabia, the coalition forces have been training for ground evasion. We see more coalition forces like Denmark, Italy, Spain, and many other countries bringing in forces, military assets. Australia, another one, Germany. They're all bringing in military assets, troops into this area because they're getting prepared for a major offensive in this area. They're getting prepared to go in fully, ground invasion, bring it to the next level, because Assad's not going to be stepping down. The people are going to vote for him. And the U.S., their backs are against the wall. They have no alternative right now unless they have peace and they withdraw their troops, get rid of the terrorists. But this is a no-win situation, because if this occurs, they'll lose control of the Middle East. The petrodollar will completely disappear, and the United States economy, the private Western Central Bank economies, will implode, and everyone will blame the central bankers and their governments. And then we'll have civil unrest and riots. We're going to have them anyhow, but the fingers will be pointed at the government and the central bank, and this is what they don't want. So the other alternative is to start war with Russia and blame this on another country or group. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.